These are some of the best builds inside of Pokemon Unite that you are not playing. Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yee to the haw, and let's talk about some of the best of the best that is ignored by the rest. And everyone else. It's ignored. These are good. Much like the amount of Fast and Furious movies out there that are not counting some of these spin-offs, there are 10 Pokemon on this list that I want to talk to you about. We've got a mix of speedsters, defenders, all-rounders, just about everything is represented inside this list. These are all good builds that you just don't play enough. So where do we start? Well, let's start with a Pokemon like Garchomp. Garchomp is a Pokemon that consistently has a high win rate and a very, very low pick rate. This means a couple things. First off, statistics-wise, this doesn't mean Garchomp is the best Pokemon in the game. I'm going to make a video about Pokemon Unite win rates if it's not out already, because I think we need to have a discussion about it. But Garchomp in the right hands is extremely powerful inside of Unite, and it has been for quite some time. While I would love to tell you to play Ground Garchomp, there's no question that the ability to catch opponents with your Dragon Claw combo is the reason to play Garchomp. Using that and moving it right into your Unite move can be the game-changing difference in so many big fights for Garchomp. The combo I'm mentioning, of course, Dragon Rush, Dragon Claw, is just when you use the moves at the same time rather than kind of using them like that, you actually get this nice combo where you catch your opponent, bring them up into the air with a slight stun right there. This sets up so many huge engagements for the team rather than this. So you catch them in your Dragon combo like so, using the two moves at the same time. From there, you can do a lot of different things. You can set up, to just continue auto attacking in a moment like that. Or, of course, you can use this to move right into a Unite move and do tons of damage to your opponents. Either way, the Dragon Rush Dragon Claw combo is the most important thing with this Pokemon. You can also combo this with an eject button so that you're able to get increased distances and some really surprising catches on your opponents that they wouldn't expect you to make. It's the reason you kind of have to run eject for this Pokemon. Now let's talk about the build. The build is Scope Lens, Muscle Band, Rapid Fire Scarf. I don't think there are really any other options for this Pokemon if you want to play it really, really well. You could, of course, rotate in a Focus Band or a Drain Crown. I don't think they're really necessary at all. I think this is your bread and butter go-to Garchomp build that's going to demolish your enemies. The emblems are as you would expect. Brown, white, and any combination that you can find with those. This is the emblem setup that I like to run. I call it Don't Run with Scissor. 6 brown, 6 white, 2 blue, a little extra critical hit, a little less HP. You, of course, could switch this around to get more HP out of this. This is what I like to run for a lot of my attack-based Pokemon. The next Pokemon on our list is Chandelure. Now, a lot of people have been playing Chandelure recently with the Flamethrower build, but I still think there's so much value in Overheat. I personally love Overheat and Poltergeist. I think they combo so well together, but of course you could also run Overheat in Prison. I know that Flamethrower got some really nice buffs, but the way that Overheat performs lets you kite your enemies in some really interesting ways, and then its final hit of Overheat kind of sets you up to play a little bit like Glaceon, where you can hit an enemy with it and simply move away from a fight. I actually think this build is a lot better solo too than Flamethrower, because you're just able to protect yourself a lot more. One of the cool things about this setup is running an item like Curse Incense on it. Now, unfortunately, we don't yet have Draft inside Pokemon Unite, so you don't know how much healing you're going to see on the other side of the map, so I could understand not running it. Items that work really well for this are Slick Spoon, Choice Specs, Wise Glasses, and a Curse Incense. Somewhere in there. I would probably drop either Wise or Choice for that Curse Incense if you want to not only do a lot of damage, but also set up a ton of situations where you are stopping enemy healing. Especially with Overheat, you're just throwing out so many huge lobs of area damage that you could set up a lot of great moments with it. And with Poltergeist, you're also setting up a lot of moments where they can walk into your silly floating furniture, and that would also apply that curse effect to your opponents. For a battle item, I think an eject button's almost necessary on this Pokemon. You have very little mobility with Chandelure, so I think you're going to need something to help you get in and out of some really bad situations. Probably not into a bad situation, but you know what I mean. And then as far as emblems are concerned, this is the setup I like to run. My green-black setup I call a Speedion. So you'll notice that this has less HP than some other setups you will see out there, but it has a good amount of move speed. And I like using this with a lot of my mages so that I can reposition them a little bit better better inside of these fights. Something I've actually really liked doing with Chandelure recently is using my Unite move really aggressively just to blind my opponents. You unfortunately do get caught a lot when you start firing that beam, but sometimes just using it to blind the enemy team in a big fight and then throwing a ton of damage can be a really good way to disrupt the enemy. For our next Pokemon, let's stay a little bit on this ghost train. Shout out to you, Final Fantasy VI. And let's talk about our next Pokemon, Gengar. Gengar is obviously a bit of a solo queue demon and doesn't really do that well competitively. The build I want to talk to you about is Hex Sludge Bomb. I think this build is kind of criminally underplayed for Gengar players, and I understand why. Dream Eater Shadow Ball is really satisfying and can chain a ton of KOs, but Hex Sludge Bomb actually sets up some really nice stuff going into a tanky meta like we have right now. Sludge Bomb does a ton of damage to high HP targets, so you poison them and they take 10 ticks of poison damage that are equal to 1% of their max HP with every tick. This sets up Gengar in a weird situation where it actually shreds some tanky Pokemon a lot faster than they would expect. And then you of course pair this with Hex and it sets up situations where you have invulnerability frames inside of a fight. So you'll use Hex, and then for moments there, you actually are not able to get hit in that little window between the dash. And if you play this correctly, you're going to avoid a lot of damage, and you're going to shred through some of the bulkier Pokemon in the game. You of course can stack on Gengar, so you could run special attack specs, but if you don't want to, I would say the build is Wise Glasses, Slick Spoon, and Curse Incense. Of course, because of the lingering effects of your Sludge Bomb and just your ability to want to go in there against some of these bulkier supporters and defenders, it's a good idea to run Curse so they're not able to use any of their built-in healing to stop you from KOing them. For a battle item, you're going to want to run either an eject button to get out of a situation where you've lost your Hex, or a full heal so you can make sure once you do jump into the enemy line, you're not stunned and stopped from doing what you need to do. For emblems, once again, you're seeing my 6 green, 7 black setup with a little extra emphasis on move speed. One real nice thing about this build is you can set it up with your Unite move where you Unite and then can easily position your Sludge into a Hex immediately into your Unite move popping out of the ground. That deletes most enemy squishy carries, you know, things like Delphox and Espeon very quickly, and then you can use the rest of your time to reposition yourself and move on to some of the bulkier targets. For our next Pokemon, let's move on to something a little more substantial, a little bulkier, maybe even a lot bulkier, one of the toughest things to take down in the game, and that is Goodra. One of the best things about Goodra is I actually think you can tailor what build you have based on what your team composition is and what the enemy team composition is. If you don't have a healer, you can run something like Dragon Pulse, so it's a little easier to stay alive in some of these battles. But even without a healer, the Muddy Water Goodra build is extremely good. You can play this either with Power Whip or Acid Spray, depending on what you see on the enemy team. The nice thing about Acid Spray is you have a long range slowing effect that you can use, and you can use this to get a lot closer to them, which gives you a huge benefit because Muddy Water really works when you're next to your enemies. Every time you are hitting your Muddy Waters, you're increasing your defenses in a crazy way. Once you're level 11, you are getting 170 defense and special defense added onto your Pokemon every time you're hitting a Muddy Water on an opposing Pokemon within this like 6-second window that you can continue to keep chaining throughout a long fight, and that can stack up to 4 times, making you the tankiest thing inside Pokemon Unite without question. There are a few cool builds and setups for this Pokemon. You could definitely run an EXP share on Goodra because it works really well as a defender with that, but at the same time, if you're playing solo, it's often a little hard to run EXP share on a Pokemon like this because it's just a little tough for your allies to take advantage of it, and you would like to be a higher level as the match comes to an end. I would recommend something like Slick Spoon, Resonant Guard, and then a third item of your choice. For Muddy Water, without a healer on the team, Focus Band is an amazing call on this Pokemon. Basically, the lower your health gets, ideally and logically, you will have been inside combat for a lot longer. You will have hit multiple Muddy Waters, and then your Focus Band will pop. You will get all that healing while your defenses are ludicrously high. This is probably the best setup for this build. However, there are a lot of great options for this Pokemon. Muscle Band is always very strong for something like Goodra. For your battle item, X Speed makes a lot of sense so you can stick to your opponents, and also Potion works really well because this Pokemon is so unbelievably tanky that giving you that extra healing it could last you a lot longer than you would expect, and you already have a ton of HP. An item I also love to run on this is an Eos cookie. I love to stack up that extra health. Stacking is also just very fun on Goodra because it's so hard to punish this Pokemon. For emblems, I run something that looks like this: 6 white, 6 green. Just a lot of defenses, making me super tanky. However, there is an emblem setup that works really well. If you're not running a muscle band, you could run 5 red on Goodra and get a nice attack speed increase. It's one of the rare Pokemon that can actually take advantage of this. Taking you over to Unite DB right now, really quick, just to look at it right here. You have 4 green, you still have 6 white and a ton of HP, which is excellent, and you have 5 red for this setup. Again, if you're not running a muscle band, this is going to give you a really nice attack speed bonus, and Goodra gets a ton from its basic attacks. Using a focus band or just using your Unite move is going to give you the amount of sustain you need to make sure that Muddy Water can really do its job and stack up those defenses. Stick near the enemy team, keep hitting them with Muddy Waters, and you're just this unbelievable force to deal with. Let's talk about another Pokemon that actually can use red emblems, and a build that I'm surprised doesn't get played a little bit more after the recent buffs, and that is Dazzling Gleam Aurora Veil Ninetales. The build for this is Rapid Fire Scarf, Slick Spoon, and a Muscle Band. You're going to want to make sure you're auto-attacking as fast as possible. At the same time, you can run X-Attack to get even extra attack speed when you're inside of your Aurora Veil. And Aurora Veil's buffs are actually really nice right now because you get a huge defensive increase inside the Veil. Not only do you get a 15% attack speed increase, you heal yourself with every single boosted attack inside the Veil. Every attack inside the Veil is boosted, and you get a flat 35% damage reduction for you and allies inside this area right here. And this is how you survive some really wild fights. It's in some surprising ways. You don't expect a Alolan Ninetales to actually survive through it. And if your allies happen to be in it as well, they can survive for a very long time. You can use this in some really good ways later in the game when you're in kind of some of these bigger team fights to make sure that your team can survive the big engagement. Again, this is another time, shout out to Unite DB, where you are going to want to use something that looks a little bit like this: 7 red, 4 white for Alolan Ninetales. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but this is one of the few Pokemon who can take advantage of that huge attack speed increase. And you're going to want all the attack speed you can get on this Pokemon, because every time you're hitting with your auto attacks, of course, again, you are healing yourself, but you're setting up that ice, snow, freeze effect onto your opponents, and it's just really tough for some enemies to deal with. It's tons of crowd control that they might not expect out of most attackers inside the game, and it's really nice defenses and recovery for you. One tip for this build: try to learn the timing between freezing your opponents and stunning them with the Dazzling Gleam. If you combo it correctly, you could set it up where you hit them with the Gleam and then hit them with multiple chunks of ice, and then they are frozen. So you're just increasing the duration of the time that they are actually essentially stunned inside of a fight, rather than sort of hitting them with everything back to back, where you're just stacking the stuns on top of each other and losing a little bit of that extra time they would be frozen. Our next Pokemon is Pursuit Absol. Absol's a really weird one because it was buffed a little while back, and I think it's gone up and down in viability, and really all it is whether or not someone is pretty cracked on Absol. And if you are, you could absolutely snowball a game. Absolutely snowball a game. You can set up some really cool plays with Sucker Punch, but I actually personally like Psycho Cut a little bit better for Absol. Sucker Punch lets you outplay your opponents in some fun ways, but Psycho Cut just lets you shred through things, especially with your Unite move, and it worked great against objectives as well. The build's pretty simple for Absol. You're going to want to have a Scope Lens, a Razor Claw, and your third item is either an Energy Amplifier, an Attack Weight, or in some rare cases, you could run something like a Drain Crown. Why do I say Drain Crown on Absol and I can't just not recommend it? It's because this is one of the few builds where you're actually auto-attacking and doing enough damage with your auto-attack, so your Pursuit counts as that auto-attack right there, where you can get decent recovery from Drain Crown. In general, I think you're probably going to do a bit better with something like an Attack Weight or an Energy Amp. An Energy Amplifier on Absol is actually sick. You hit a Psycho Cut onto an enemy or even onto an objective Pokemon and then throw your Unite move, you rip that thing to shreds. For your battle item, I would definitely recommend either an eject button or a full heal. I like eject button more on Absol. I just find that if you jump in and you miss your pursuit and you're in a lot of trouble, I don't know if the full heal is going to give you enough time to get out of that situation. I think it's a little stronger to run eject in a lot of those moments. For emblems, you're seeing it once again, the 6 brown, 6 white with a little extra critical hit. And hey, Absol doesn't mind a little extra critical hit. Something I wanted to show you with Absol is how well it does soloing objectives inside of Pokemon Unite. Now, I spawned this objective early, so this isn't the exact amount of health an objective would normally have. I just want to point that out. But what you can do with Absol is use your pursuit around these objectives. Since they're so obvious in what they're doing, it's easy to always hit your pursuits. You just simply attack it once, bounce behind it, attack it once, bounce behind it, continue, resetting your pursuits as you go. As soon as it goes to set up a move, you can easily bounce behind and set up your pursuits. It's so simple to take down these objectives. Again, that is not a full health Regice, but you get the idea of how simple it would be to rip through some of these objectives. And you can also, of course, use your Unite move in a similar way. Let me go ahead and show you right here. Your Unite move can set up some big secures on some of these wild Pokemon. So if you're already attacking it and you're getting its health kind of low right here, what you can do is just get it to about, I don't know, I'd say a third maybe in a normal situation. Hit it with a pursuit and then immediately, hit it with a Psycho Cut and then immediately into your Unite and you rip it away. Again, not a full health Regice, but that is what you can do with this setup. Let's talk about everyone's favorite Pokemon that Timmy seems to nerf all the time, and that is Cramorant, specifically Dive Cram. If you know me, you know I love me some Cramorant, even though the game seems to not like how good it is at times. Dive Cramorant is one of the highest skill builds inside of Pokemon Unite, and you can do some really amazing things with it if you get the hang of this build. A good item setup for Cramorant is Slick, Spoon, Energy Amplifier, and then usually the third item is up to you. Buddy Barrier actually works really well, but you can also opt for something that gives you a little more cooldown reduction, like a Shell Bell. You could opt for Wise Glasses, you could opt for a Choice Specs. A lot of these items work pretty well on Cramorant, but there's nothing wrong with really focusing on that Unite move. Your Unite move is killer, and you are quite literally almost a sitting duck when you use it. Given that you really don't have a lot of mobility once you use your Unite move, I would say none at all. You want to run an eject button on this Pokemon. I don't think there's any other item that comes close. You can reposition your entire Unite move with this, and it is very, very valuable. Not only could you bait your opponents into coming closer and then eject back towards your team, you also can use it to move around walls in some really interesting ways, and it gets you out of some bad situations. Luckily, with Cramorant and Dive, you don't find yourself in bad situations too often once you start to learn how to use Dive. Every time you dive, you get a big boosted attack. You can use this to dance around your opponents, while at the same time, you can go over and kind of through most walls and sort of outcroppings on Thea Sky Ruins with Dive Cram. Your emblem loadout is going to be my green-black setup that I've been showing you today. I think this is the best setup for something like Cramorant. Once you start to learn how this Pokemon works and you start to set up some sneaky Unite moves around Rayquaza, I think your life is going to go well. I've noticed that the more aggressive I get with Cramorant's Unite move, often the better things work. Once a fight looks like it's going okay, or we catch one of our opponents, I like to step on the gas. Use your Unite then, and use it to push your advantage. I've noticed some people use Cramorant's Unite move more defensively, and I actually think it works so well to use when you're already doing sort of well inside of a moment of Pokemon Unite. Use that to continue beating your enemies with Cram's Unite move. Also, you can use it in some fun ways, like behind walls and things like that, that just annoy your opponents in huge ways. Our next Pokemon on the list that, look, there's no question this Pokemon needs a buff inside of Unite, but it's still a strong carry and it's pretty underplayed, and that is Charizard. There's really one Charizard build that consistently seems to do well, and that's Flamethrower Fire Blast. I think it's because you get to play with Char at a decent range for a lot of the fight, and then finally decide when it's time to go in and use that huge game-changing Unite move. Again, no question we could use some buffs on this Pokemon, but this build actually does carry pretty hard. I personally like running Muscle Band, Scope Lens, and Curse Bangle. Now, unfortunately, we don't know what kind of healing you're going to see on the other side of the map, so I could easily see someone saying I get more consistency out of something like an energy amplifier or even an attack weight to make sure that all of my abilities are better. No question about it, but I feel like I just get so much value out of the Curse Bangle with this Pokemon. It's really easy to apply curse damage, and most enemy teams are going to have some healing to them, either inside their own kits or, you know, with the Pokemon walking around like Clefable. And even if they don't, you're adding some extra attack to Charizard. Your battle item is definitely going to be X Speed. You're going to use this when you unite oftentimes, and you're going to be able to chase down enemies. A lot of things are pretty slippery and they can try to get away from you for sure. So you're going to want to make sure that you can chase them with the X Speed during your unite move. You'll also be able to move in and out of a lot of fights a lot better with this as well. And then your emblems, the 6 white, 6 brown that we have been talking about with the little extra critical hit. It's really, really nice for Char. I think one of the most important things about Charizard is recognizing what targets you can unite and what targets are not good candidates for a unite move. For instance, if the enemy team has a Glaceon on it, you definitely want to unite Glaceon. However, its passive will cancel your unite move. And there are a lot of Pokemon who have different passives, different abilities that will cancel your unite move. Look at the enemy team, see which Pokemon don't have full heal, and at the same time, see which Pokemon don't have a move that is going to cancel out your unite move. Anything that stops crowd control effects inside Unite, so Safeguard or something like that on Blissey, or a move that makes them unstoppable, like when Gyarados is charging up Bounce, you cannot unite them in those moments. Oftentimes what you'll do is you'll find a squishy target without anything like that, sorry Decidueye, and you will pick that as your target for uniting. Once you have that down, you're going to be in a great spot with Charizard. Our next Pokemon has been climbing the win rate charts for a little while here, but it actually still has a very low play rate, and this build specifically does. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Mime. I know. We can't go back to the Mr. Mime meta, and I don't want you to go back, and I don't want to go back either, but the fact of the matter is, with Resonant Guard, Mime is kinda back in a big way. Confusion Barrier is the most popular Mime build, and it's really, really good. I could highly recommend you run Confusion Barrier, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Psychic Power Swap. Psychic Power Swap is actually still doing really, really good inside of Pokemon Unite, and I think a big reason for that, again, is the Resonant Guard. The build you're going to want to run is Resonant Guard, Slick Spoon, and then either EXP Share, or, since you're playing solo a lot of the time, one other item that's going to help you win a lot of your fights, and that could be a stacking item. Your scaling is not insane on this build, but if you are stacking special attack specs, this item is going to give you more healing than any other item inside the game. So it's something to think about, but I do think Mime can reliably be played with an EXP share, and while Mime already dominates the lane, you're just going to make sure that your lane ally is ready to win a ton of big fights. The emblem loadout I like is 6 white, 6 green for this Pokemon. The cooldown from black is fine, but you're really tanky as Mime, and you want to lean into getting that extra HP. It's also going to help in general with everything that's going on with Mime, so the more HP, the better. Something to notice with Power Swap is when you are swapped to an ally, of course you are healing them, you both have increased move speed, you are both being able to, target and charge up your Psychic, so your Psychic will, work on both you and your ally, creating some really nice damage, especially if your ally is like, Tyranitar or something like that, jumping into the enemy team. But you are also increasing the damage they do. So even if you're power swapping someone in the back line like a Decidueye, their arrows are going to hit harder when you are power swapping them. If it's attached to an enemy, by the way, you are decreasing the damage that they do. Your job as Mime is really to disrupt the enemy team, and this is a big way to do it. Something to also notice, if you're going to power swap an enemy and use Psychic, you can power swap them, use Psychic, and then jump into your Unite move for a ton of damage. So I'd just like to show that to you here inside the practice area. If you jump on in, obviously with your Unite move, you do damage and you're stunning your opponents a ton inside this. That's really what it's for stunning your enemies a lot. But at the same time, you can use that after you have power swapped an enemy right here, and you are going to continue doing a ton of damage. Now you also, of course, could do that not only after you've power swapped, but after you've used Psychic to just do an insane amount of damage with an insane amount of stun. Ideally, the way you're going to want to start your fights is first power swapping right into the Psychic and then right into your Unite move for a huge burst of damage and stun and all the good stuff that comes along with it. The last Pokemon on our list is someone who was dominating for a long time, and then, to be fair, they did nerf it. However, I think as a community, we're just kind of leaving this Pokemon behind when it's still very, very good. And I'm talking about Lapras. Water Pulse Ice Beam Lapras is still a nutty good build. This Pokemon is so incredible. It does so much damage still. Its Unite move is still brutal, even though they have increased the charging time on it. I think now what you're seeing with Lapras is it's probably a lot closer to an A tier build than the S tier broken nonsense that we have had before. But Lapras is still nuts. Every time you use Water Pulse, you get a boosted attack that heals you. It's just so incredibly good. Let's talk about the build. I like Slick Spoon special attack specs for stacking extra special damage and then Resonant Guard. This is a super, super fun way to play this Pokemon. You get the nice tankiness from Resonant Guard, the extra shields, so you're in combat all the time. You're also doing more damage with your Unite and your Water Pulse, and you get extra healing. It's just really, really awesome. It's hard to stop Lapras from stacking because it's so incredibly bulky. You're going to be running the 6 green, 6 white emblems that we've been looking at before. Again, just leaning into that extra health. The big combo with Lapras is that Unite move, huge wave right into the Ice Beam. You just set up moments where the enemy team is stuck for way, way too long, and it's an easy way to delete the, squishy carries on the opposing team. I've been wondering if some teams are going to try running a little more Lapras, and I honestly would like to see it, but when something gets nerfed, I think people jump off of it too fast. And I think as a community, we have jumped off Lapras too quick, and that's why it's on my list. So there you have it, 10 great builds inside of Pokemon Unite that people just aren't playing enough. What do you think should be on this list that isn't? What do you like that I added? What do you think isn't too good? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you. I'll see you all next time. We did it.